Kathy Bell, and I'm with the Disability Channel in Burlington. I'm at the Halton Naval Association headquarters, and I'm interviewing a naval veteran, Andy Barber. And this is Andy Barber. So thank you so much for coming in today.
Well, thank you very much, Kathy. It's an honor. I'm very grateful that you chose me to do this, and also to be able to speak to those people in the Disability Channel, which I think is a marvelous channel and a marvelous organization.
Okay, this first question, the obvious one. What made you join the Navy?
Well, I've been asked this question quite often when I go to speak to children in schools. And back in 1949, 1950, I was in high school, and I wasn't doing too well at all. And of course, in those days, your parents always said to you either go to school or you go to work. And so I got one of the best jobs, eventually got one of the best jobs any 17-year-old could ever have in the Canadian National Railways as what is known as a carman apprentice. That's a fellow that would repair cars, freight cars, and passenger cars, and so on and so forth. They're teaching me, of course, all the trades, carpentry, steel work, you name it. And so I was there for the better part of about a year or so. And one day I was standing in the pay lineup, and of course in those days you got your paycheck in a little brown envelope. And inside the envelope there was a little breakdown of what your pay was. And I'm looking at that thing, and I've been annoyed by this, that everything I've been doing, they're taking income tax off. So I happened to say out loud, damn, they're taking that income tax off again today. And my brother-in-law's brother, who was a couple ahead of me in the lineup, he said to me, well, if you don't want to pay income tax, Andy, why don't you join the armed forces? He says, why don't you, he says, join the Navy like I did. He said, who knows? He said, you could wind up maybe one of the new carriers that the Navy has, or heck, even wind up over in Korea. I said, they don't take tax off? No, he said, the Canadian Armed Forces, they don't take tax off your paycheck. Well, I thought about it, and when I turned 18 at the crack of midnight, the next day I went up to HMCS Donnacona in Montreal, and I got my application, and I filled it all out and brought it home for my mother and father to sign, which they wouldn't, because they were, of course, we'd just gone through World War II, and we'd lost, some of our family members, and they were not amused, not happy with me wanting to join, so they refused to sign. But they eventually did. And so, sure enough, there I was in the Navy, HMCS Donnacona, and the first paycheck I got, believe it or not, there was income tax on it. And if I could have got my brother-in-law's brother, I think I would have strangled him right there in the spot. But the point was that started a 5-year adventure. And that 5-year adventure has been one of the best 5 years of my life. So that's why I joined. It was sort of a silly reason, but I at that time did have a bit of a wanderlust in me, and I thought, maybe that's a good idea to go join the Navy.
Weren't you worried about, having the odds increasing of you dying young if you join the Navy?
Well, the funniest thing, and every veteran will tell you this, is that you always think it's the guy beside you that's going to get it, not you.
Oh, okay.
So, but at that time, as I say, being young and stupid, you don't think about those kind of things. Ignorance is bliss, as they say. Until you get there, until you get into the action, and then it's no longer funny.
Okay. Can you tell us about the training you underwent? You learned some really valuable stuff there.
Right. You see, back in the 50s, things were a lot different than they are today for the armed forces. Back in the 50s, you got roughly about 7 or 8 weeks of basic training. And what they did, of course, is they had to convert you from a civilian to a Canadian Forces member, in my case, a sailor, in a matter of that time. So you didn't have your mummy to make your bed or the meals or anything else. You know, you were being told what to do, when to do it, and how fast you could do it, and so on and so forth. So it took about 7 to 8 weeks. I think it was about 8 weeks, and then you became, shall we say, graduated from what we call basic training. And from basic training, then of course, in those days, they were looking for certain trade groups. In my case, they were looking for communicators, and visual communicators in particular. And so they chose me to become a visual communicator along with a bunch of other fellas. Now, that was a bit of a strenuous course. It lasted roughly about 8 months. And you had to learn the Morse code. You had to learn anything to do with visual communication. It's called silent communication in the war zone. And included in that, of course, is knowing all the different flags for signals at sea and so on and so forth. And also...
what about, the Morse code? Isn't Morse code difficult? If I hear ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, it just goes right through me, Well,
Morse code, basically, when you're learning it, it's like learning a second language. And
you already know French?
I do, but I'm not fluently anymore, but I do know it. When it comes to Morse code, even today, I go aboard ship in Haida, which is, by the way, down there at Pier 9 in Hamilton. It's a National Historic Site. And I went to the radio room, and I have the children and the parents come aboard, and I'll say to them, I'll explain what the radio room is about, communication center is about. Then I'll say to them, I say, what's your name? And then the young fellow may say, well, my name is Ryan. So I'll just go on the Morse code key and I'll go did-da-did, R, da-did-da-da, Y, did-da, A, da-did, N. I said, there's Ryan, there's your name. Now you sit here and you do it. And I have a big board like that. And the little guy sits there and he goes and he does it. And the parents are thrilled. But for me, that was a living. That's what I did for a living. But I did not do that in the radio room. I did that up on the bridge. Up on the bridge and in the flag deck, we have 10-inch signal projectors. And for those today, that 10-inch signal projector was my internet. That's how I communicated with all the ships. Because when you're in a war zone, you're going to maintain radio silence. If you don't maintain radio silence, the bad guys can hear you, and they can cause you some real serious damage, even disaster. And so that's what I do on the light at the 10-inch signal projector to speak to all the different ships in the squadron. And of course, there's a larger one, which is like a searchlight, a 20-inch signal projector. Again, more using Morse code. And if you go aboard the ship and look up on the yard arms, you're going to see lights. And those lights, again, are connected to the Morse code key that's down on the flag deck. And so you're able to communicate great distances very silently without anybody, the enemy finding out about you. If the enemy can see it, that means they're in sight and you're in battle.
They can tell, right?
They can tell. They'll tell it's you. Yeah. So we learned that. Also, I learned all the different colors of the flags. There's aboard ship, of course, aboard ship, there's a flag locker. And then that flag locker, there's 26 alphabetical flags. There's a bunch of certain designated pennants that will, like a introduction. There's 91 slots each in each one of those flag lockers we have aboard. They're like the pigeonholes. Okay, and they have little flags on the side. So, for instance, if the Commodore in charge of the squadron wants us all to turn, shall we say, 10 degrees to port, he will, we call bend on, but he will connect the turn flag, red for port, and the 10 penny, the tent number. And so he'll put it up halfway. He will put ours up halfway.
Oh.
When he looks around and he sees everybody's got it up halfway, he goes right to the top of his, and we go right to the top of ours. And then when he's ready to turn, he strikes it, we strike ours, and bang, all the ships turn exactly in the same direction at the same time. So that's called visual communication. And those flags, you had to know them. When you were in there, you had to be trained well enough to just reach in very quickly without even thinking. and they say connect those flags and put them up there and take them down. And the other thing too was semaphores. Now semaphore is a lost art these days. Girl guides and scouts used to do it in the old days.
What's semaphore?
Well, it's a series of 2 flags.
Okay.
And you hold them in such a position that each flag actually designates an alphabetic letter of the alphabet.
Yeah.
A, B, C, etc., all the way around. And so by using those flags, you can speak to somebody, if they can read it, without causing any sound or whatever. And many of funny things, we do go to schools and we do go to events. One was in downtown Toronto, one of the big halls. And I was doing the same thing as I mentioned before, talking to the children. I'll show you how to say your name and that. And as I'm doing it, there's 2 ladies in the background.
Yeah.
And they're reading it. And I could hear them saying, C-A-N. And I look over, and sure enough, they were in the Girl Guides, and they did learn semaphore as a part of their training in the Girl Guides, and they were able to read what I was saying. So I had to be very careful that I wasn't making any mistakes or using any crude language, But yeah, so that was the 3 facets of visual communications. Number 1, it was using the lights for Morse code. Number 2, the flags for signaling changes to the ship direction. And of course, semaphore, if it's close enough that they can see you.
Wow, you learned a lot. It must have. I'm impressed. I'm definitely impressed with. Can you tell us about your naval exercises on the HMCS Quebec, and
well, HMCS Quebec, that was my first ship to go on. It was a training ship for the Royal Canadian Navy. It used to be HMS Uganda.
Okay.
British actually owned it or gave it to the Canadian Navy back in the 1940s and 50s. And our job again, what I was doing there was exactly what I just described to you as a visual signalman. But it was my first chance to go to sea. And it was quite an experience because I had never understood seasickness, but I was seasick for 1 day. And now what people don't realize what seasickness is, in the back of your ears here, there are 3 channels with fluid going through them. You should know that.
Yep.
And once those channels go off balance as far as liquid goes, then you start being very bilious. But anyhow, I got aboard to Quebec. We wound up going over to Norway and being part of the United Nations, or say the NATO fleet over in Norway. And our job, the place we went, our job basically was to play the part of the Bismarck. And this is in Narvik, Norway.
This sounds a little funny, playing the part of the Bismarck. This sounds like teenagers having fun. I mean, to be honest, okay, you're going to whack me with this, but are these really naval exercises?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And what it is that it's not only a Canadian Navy over there. We've got the American Navy, the British Navy, the Australian Navy, New Zealand Navy. They're all United Nations, all NATO navies. Mm-hmm. Okay? And our job is to communicate with all of them in a realistic battle scenario. And so, in essence, they were given to Quebec because we were the largest ship there, one of the largest ships there. The task of being the German ship Bismarck. Their job was to sneak out of Narvik, Norway, and to then go amongst the other ships and sink them, which they could have.
Hold on, you were thinking the Bismarck, or you were thinking?
Well, I was thinking we're the enemy.
Oh, you're the Bismarck?
Yeah, we're the enemy.
Okay.
We're Bismarck, the enemy, And the other ships, the Allies, are trying to find us and sink us. So our job was to sink them.
Oh.
And so that was quite the experience for me, being a signalman, watching all this going on and not knowing, you had to be on training. So you had to, on the spot training. So you had to learn those things and where to stand, where to be, where, what's expected of you in a particular situation.
Was this naval commander of your boat a real character or something?
Oh yeah,
Budge?
Patrick David Budge was his name. He was a officer. Was a sailor's officer, and he had been in World War II. He'd been actually in World War One, World War II, and basically he was quite a guy. He was actually, by the way, unfortunately for us guys, he was also a communicator, a signalman.
Oh.
And so every mistake we made, he was really hard on us. He would say, "Listen, that's not how you do it. You do it this way or that way." But we had a bit of incidents in Narvik, Norway. When we went alongside, they did not send out a pilot vessel to come bring us in. So he had to bring it alongside himself, which he's quite capable of doing. But with the tides and everything in Narvik, and all these sunken vessels that were there from World War II, it became a dicey little thing to go through, which would have been much easier if we'd had a pilot on board to bring us alongside.
But Norwegian was communist.
He was. It was a socialist communist country at the time. So we went ashore, and one of the things he said, if you don't have what is known as, we call it passerdirk, a knife. It's a seaman's knife, special knife, and we use that for doing different things aboard the ship, splicing and so on and so forth. Go get one. And so then we'll bring me back the bill. So we did. We went ashore. And for some of us, it was our first time, and the restaurants were there. We went in and sat down, and of course, being sailors, you always want to have a little bit of a drink. And they served us as aquavit.
Oh, they served you. Oh.
Yes. The trouble with the aquavit, it was a drink we never heard of before, and it was as smooth as silk until a few hours later when it became less than smooth. So there was a few incidents that happened. And
they wouldn't feed you, would they?
Well, no. What happened was we went into restaurants for whatever reason. They didn't want to feed us. Now again, shall we say, we're part of a democracy or a freedom, and so they didn't want to feed us. And so one of our guys, or a couple of our guys, having had the aquavit, were going by a hospital, and they saw this gurney full of food, and decided they were going to help themselves. One guy, again, decided he wanted to have the Norwegian flag, so he decided he would crawl up the flagpole, or get the flag down from the flagpole to City Hall, and he took off his tunic and he wrapped it around himself and put his tunic back on, and etc. So there was we couldn't get a cab to take us back to the ship.
Yeah.
And so some of the guys just absconded with bicycles, and of course that was a lot of criminal offenses there, and but we got away, and next day. We got Captain Budge got a message from Prime Minister Louis Saint Laurent. He was very, very dismayed with the conduct of our thingy, and of course we were front page on Pravda, which is Pravda was the communist newspaper. Canadian Navy sailors chasing women through the streets with knives, and so on and so forth. And of course, it was not true. There was only one or two of us. Of the 1,400 different people aboard that ship, there was maybe a couple of fools that did that. And so he called us all together, and we thought, oh boy, here it comes. We're going to have extra duty. We're going to be scrubbing decks. We're going to be painting. And he called us all together, and he said, normally, you all deserve severe discipline. He said, but under the circumstances in which they greeted our troops, our Navy sailors, he said, I'm not going to do that. He said, but just pay attention in the future when you go ashore that you're wearing the uniform of your country. He said, so from now on, he said, just be very careful when you go ashore what you're doing. And he said, the reason he told us, he said, if they didn't want to treat us with hospitality, then I know from my experience, he said, that certain things are going to happen. And so we sort of got off easy. God love us. But yeah, so that was quite the incident. That was my first exposure to sea duty and being ashore and so on and so forth.
Okay. I visited the Haida in Hamilton last weekend. And it was better than I remember it. I've seen it before, but I haven't seen it for about 20 years. We spent 2 hours there, It was a great experience. My brother was with us, and we couldn't film there, though, but we're working on a permit to be able to film. So I was wondering, can you tell me about your time on the Haida? How did that come about?
Actually, I had been on a small ship called HMCS La Halois, and I was over at the coronation of Queen Elizabeth. And when we returned, I got drafted aboard HMCS Haida because she was going over to Korea.
Oh.
And usually when ships are going into a war zone, they try to get some of the more experienced sailors as crew members,
Okay.
so they're being exposed to different things. And so I got aboard the Haida. And I was, again, as I mentioned, the signalman.
Pardon? What did you say?
The signalman.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's guys like they call us bunting tossers or flag wavers or whatever you want to call it. But again, like I mentioned before, when you're in a war zone, you have to maintain radio silence, and the visual communicators are just the most important people aboard that ship at times.
That's nice. You're important.
Yeah. But as far as it goes, I do take people on tours of the Haida, and I tell them all my stories. And if my friend Mike was here now, Mike Pencil, he would be saying, and the waves crashed, and the ship. So, yes, I do explain different things about the ship and my experiences aboard it, and it's fun.
What was the purpose of the Haida going to South Korea?
Right, I was going to the Korean Peninsula. The Haida actually is Canada's most famous warship, as it is described by many people, the fighting a ship during World War II. She had this very distinguished record of 1,400 service vessels that she sunk, together with the submarine. And a lot of people don't know, but HMCS Haida, together with HMCS Huron, took the surrender of Norway from the Germans in World War II in May 1945. They went up the Trondheim Channel together, and they kept their guns pointed fore and aft because of the fact that there was still 88,000 German soldiers and troops on land. Now, it would have been a fair fight as far as I'm concerned, but seriously, they had to. And so her reputation, Haida's reputation, was made during World War II as a part of the 10th Flotilla over in England, and of course, Normandy and those places. She also was a part of a convoy that went to Murmansk. The Russians were desperate for food supplies and troops, etc. And Haida was one of the escorts, along with the many other ships that escorted the convoys over to Murmansk.
Yeah, but back to the islands, what you did.
Right, going back to,
You're not getting off so easily. Okay.
Right, going back to Korea, we did go over there in July 27th, 1953. An armistice was declared and signed. But a lot of people don't know this. That it was not signed by the politicians. of either side. It was signed by the heads of the military of each nation that was involved there.
Okay.
And the second thing about that armistice was that there was no peace treaty included.
There was no what?
No peace treaty.
Oh.
And the reason for that, we have no idea, but the thing is that they did not include that like they normally did in armistice. They would have a peace treaty in which both sides would agree to stop fighting and end the war period. But they didn't do it. First of all, Syngman Rhee, who was president of Korea at the time, he refused to sign it because he always had in his mind that he wanted to have a united Korea. And so he wouldn't sign it, together with the fact that there was some dispute about prisoner exchange. And so in essence, technically, as you see on the news today, those North and South Korea are still technically at war. They had never signed a ceasefire or a peace treaty. They did sign a ceasefire, but not a peace treaty. So when we were over there, our job during that time, we got over there just after the armistice was signed in February '54. Our job was to go from island to island to island in the peninsula of Korea and make sure there was no buildup of troops and no buildup of any arms, etc. Now, one of the agreements with the armistice was that both military powers, they could maintain the exact amount of power that they had over their troops, equipment, everything, both sides. You can add to it only if somebody else had to tell us to leave. For instance, in our case, if there was a ship that went back home, then we could put another ship back in there to maintain that balance of power as far as all of the peace treaty was, or not peace treaty, but the armistice called for. So our job was to go from island to island to island to island to make sure that there was no buildup of communist troops or supplies, etc. And if there was, then we, of course, have to take action against it, report it to the United Nations Command, who in turn would give the South Korean Republic of South Korea permission to go and remove those people from the island.
Were you very careful not to fire any weapons, or, I mean, you don't want to create a disturbance or uprising, or? Well,
yeah, like that was again, of course, the captain of the ship or the commanders of that particular fleet, the admirals of that particular fleet, that would give us permission or not. The saddest thing about that type of thing is when you're dealing with the United Nations, if you want to fire a shot, sometimes you have to go 16 through 16 different people to get permission.
Oh.
Well, it's really a weird situation, even in this day and age, when our United Nations peacekeepers are there. If they want to do something, they have to have permission from about 4 or 5 other overseers countries to get that one thing done.
I thought, okay, how do you tell the difference between the North Koreans and the South Koreans? How can you tell whether they're not supposed to be there or not? I mean, they can dress up as I.
Again, that all goes back to first of all identification, because they don't necessarily dress or, shall we say, act in the same way as the average people that are supposed to be in your war zone. They're not. They start acting out of character type of thing than what you're used to. So that's one. But we always had a Republic of Korea officer aboard, and it was his job to. Now, a good example. When we go around island to island at night, we'd be in a dark ship, and we come across these what they call sampans, or large fishing vessels. Excuse me. And they'd be dark. Now, in those days, there was no great GPS or a little bit of radar, but nothing that the poor fishermen could afford. Yeah. So if they wanted to go to sleep or go to have some rest or stand down time, they would take the helm, which is what's steering the ship, And they would tie 2 ropes to it like this.
Okay.
And they would set a course that they'd be going around with their fishing nets out. So we come upon them.
Okay.
And we'd say, we look at them.
Crash into them.
Well, almost. But we come back, and then, of course, our Republican officer would yell out to them, "Annyeonghaseyo," which is Korean is good afternoon, good evening, good day, or hello. And if there was no reply, then the captain, or who was ever there, usually the captain, would say, "Light them up, signalman." Now, we had this huge 20th signal projectors, like a searchlight. You see them at the events there. And inside there was 2 carbon rods.
Yeah.
When they were lit, it was as bright as a summer day.
Okay.
So we'd hit them with that, and most times that woke them up. And they'd come running up, and the first couple of times we saw them, it was kind of funny for us. Having seen them for the first time. And we'd be giggling, and they'd, "Knock it off, Park, there, it's not funny." And we found out why, because a couple of them we stopped, they'd come up with guns. But then if they why did they say knock it off, it's not funny? Well, it's our officer.
Yeah, why did he say that?
Well, it wasn't funny. This is a serious situation.
Yes, it is. It is.
When you don't know if you're going to get shot at.
Oh, yeah.
If they had explosives aboard that could blow you and your ship up. So, but we thought it was funny, but it wasn't. And suddenly, if that didn't work, if they didn't wake up with that, what we would do is we'd fire 40 millimeters, our little 40 millimeter gun across the bow of the ship. Now, that usually woke them up. And they come up and they're more frenzy, more frantic. But
can I ask you something? The sampans, do they have a lower deck part?
Yes.
They do. Because I keep thinking they're flat.
Yeah, they're like built again, more square than, and the hulls were a little bit more square, but deeper, a little bit deeper, because they had to go into certain areas. But if they didn't, in the past, I don't recall us doing it maybe we did, but if they turned away, excuse me, we knew that they were the enemy, or bad guys. And so if they didn't stop, some of our ships put a couple of shells right in the hull that would stop them. And then the little gunboat that we had following us, the Republic of Korea gunboat, would come along and they would take them prisoner and bring them to the local island, to local authorities, and incarcerate them for investigation and so on and so forth. So that's what we did. We went, like I said, from island to island to ensure that there was no buildup of troops or communist equipment, trucks or cannons. Because if they were able to infiltrate an island, then they could spy on everything that's going on around them. And they could tell their people what we're doing. And so we didn't want that.
Okay, yeah. Did you see dead bodies in the water or something?
Occasionally, like when it was sunrise, and especially if we're in a harbor, Pangyang-do, anchored off Pangyang-do, we couldn't tell if they were actually fishermen or if they were enemy or friendly, because their uniforms would have been bleached white from the salt water. But yeah, then what they did, of course, when you die, those people, their body would have been bloated like a balloon. And the only way that you could recover them, of course, was to clean it and get rid of all the excess and take the body.
Whose job was that?
Sure as heck wasn't mine. I was glad for that.
Yeah, lucky.
But it was usually part of the medic team that were there.
Paramedic.
And it's usually like part of the gunboats, the Republic of Korea ships that were with us. They usually got that task. But it was still very ugly to see. Very ugly to see.
I bet. You mentioned in one article I was looking at, your memory project.
Right.
You mentioned you traveled up and down the Han Peninsula and the Han Estuary area.
Right.
That's very close to the Korean.
Right. One of our job was we were one of the ships that was assigned occasionally to go up the Han River, Han Estuary.
Actual Han River?
Right up the north, right to the, shall we say, the mouth of it, and to make sure that there's no communist crossing back and forth, because it was like maybe a kilometer, 2 kilometers between North and South Korea. So a lot of people were, at that time were leaving North Korea to come to South Korea. Now we didn't know if they were spies infiltrating South Korea, if they were just poor farmers or whatever that were trying to get away. Our job was to sit up there and to make sure that, of course, the communist guns would be staring down at us. And
it was high up.
Oh yeah,
like
they were
cliffs
called.
and
Yeah,
everything?
they were called.
Oh.
Yeah, embankments, shore batteries.
That's a lot.
Called, and they would be actually staring down at us, and that's all. It was kind of scary. At that time.
Would they fire at you?
Well, if they thought that we were doing something aggressive, they would have had the opportunity. They did not have the same structure that we did in the United Nations. They had, like, from top to bottom, one voice talking, open fire. And so, I think their artillery commanders did not have the local discretion. They might have had local discretion, but they had to have permission from Kim Il-sung at that time.
They did have
from
to have
him.
permission.
But yeah, so you never knew,
What did you do if they did start firing, or some airplane was buzzing at you or something?
Yeah, when we were out anchoring off of the island of Pangyang-do, which has changed the name now, by the way. Can't think of it. It's a big long one now. Quite often we'd be out there just keep an eye on things, and we see these MiGs in a distance, and of course they're traveling at quite a high speed, but we were always hoping that when we saw them, we would, of course, go to action stations, but we were hoping that the British and the American planes would get up there and chase them off, which they normally did. Yeah. But occasionally we did have to go out into the peninsula of Korea and form what is known as a barrage.
What is that?
What it is you'd have, if you could just visualize it, there'd be a series of ships in a circle.
Okay.
And our job, was to protect the larger ships, which are the major ships in the actual fleet. And so their job was to form a barrier around them, so if the planes did come over, when you fire it up, there would be an actual wall of bullets, etc., shells going up at these things. So they would fly into them. They have to fly into them in order to get at any major ships. So that's what we did. We formed called a barrage formation. Didn't do it too often. I think I recall. No, going back.
You fired back at them.
If we had to. But we never had to. What happened was they were usually chased off or taken care of by the Americans or the British or New Zealanders, whoever were flying up there.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, okay. How, went back to the hideout, okay? Well, we're on the hideout anyway right now. So, there were like 230 or 250 people in the hideout.
That's right.
Wasn't that crowded?
Not for a fashion.
No.
We went over there was 250 crew members. We came back to 260 because we had a couple of guys that are hitchhiking ride home.
Are they all on? Do you work in shifts? Do some people sleep and you work?
Exactly. You nailed it. I think that's exactly what we did. If I think about it, there was 250 aboard there, but like 1/3 would be, up on top on duty, shall I say duty watch. Well, 1/3 would be up during the day up there doing maintenance on the ship or doing practicing their exercises, what they're doing for their job, and the other 1/3 would be to stand down, or they'd be down below catching their 40 winks and getting their sleep, etc. So, you know, there was never, I never felt that it was crowded.
No?
No, God, no.
You didn't have to go.
I was about that size. The size of it. I believe it or not, I was 135, 140 pounds when I was in the Navy. But no one will ever see that again. But in essence, no, we moved about quite easily, and everybody had their own part of the ship. They had the stokers, what they call mess, which is where all the stokers accumulated. They ate, they slept, they rode letters home and everything in these mess decks. We all had our own mess deck. So when you dispersed, even if it was 2/3 of us aboard the ship, we would be going back to different parts of the ship, which were isolated, obviously, with bulkheads. We call them walls, if you want to call it that. In order that the whole ship is designed to become immediately watertight once it becomes, if it ever got watertight.
Oh, okay.
Watertight,
okay.
What happens is that if you're in a storm or if you're in action, the entire ship is docked down. Otherwise, all the hatches and doors are closed and they're secured so that no water can get in. The ship becomes, you know, by section, becomes basically self-sustaining. And so...
That's a relief.
Well, in essence, because of that, because you had all the different people spread throughout the ship, don't forget there was three levels of the ship. Okay. The first level was the main deck. The next one was another group of decks throughout the ship, and the third one down was another one. That's where the supply people slept in that. But in essence, yeah. So it wasn't really that crowded because you dispersed and you were sitting in your own mess deck and talking to your own guys. Our mess deck, we had about 20 people there.
What was the food like?
Well, when you're young, you don't care. It was very good, by the way. I don't recall ever having any problems consuming what I've been given. And that was the other thing. They taught you in the Navy how to wash dishes, how to do all sorts of things that you would not normally do as a youngster this day and age. So, for instance, every day it would be two of us assigned to what we call mess duty. And what we would do is our job would be to go and to get the meals, bring it, dish it out to all the guys. And if they wouldn't got their own, then it didn't matter. We then had to wash up all the dishes, make sure the deck was nice and clean, and because aboard ship, believe it or not, hygiene was a very, very high priority. Hygiene, making sure that everything was clean, because if something spread, you can imagine what would happen with 250 guys aboard the ship.
You all get sick.
Yeah, and so in essence, that we did. Those mess decks we belonged to, each one of the stokers had theirs, the electricians had theirs, the communicators had theirs. Everybody had their own, and of course the officers had the wardroom and their cabins down below. So if you got 250 people aboard the ship, when you stand down, okay, you're not really bumping into each other because you're in your own little section, which accommodates you. And even at that little section, it could become a bit crowded because you slept in hammocks.
Yeah.
That was really
Do you have your own hammocks? Do you put your own hammock up and then take it down when you're done?
Absolutely. Every morning, every night. When you come off duty, you slung your hammock up. You each chose your own position, depending on seniority. You know, like the senior guy had his own choice of anywhere he wanted, the next one, so on and so forth. But in essence, so we would sling our mix and call into them at night. And I can tell you right now, it was one of the best sleeps anybody could have. Well, you can imagine in the summertime, people laying in a hammock in their backyard. Well, if you're aboard ship and the ship is going all over the place, that hammock just went with it, and you were rocked like a baby. And of course, in the morning, at about 6:25, there'd be the pipe. Wakey, wakey, rise and shine. And so we got up and we did our hammocks and put them in our hammock rack. and when we got on our way. And of course, we went into the washroom. And of course, that's when we got in there and sometimes shaved and washed up. One of the things that people aboard ship were quite amused about, if you want to call it that, is when you never took a shower when you were at sea.
Never take a shower.
Never
No, you
take
were
a
not
shower?
allowed to. The reason for it is, to take, for instance, the case of the Haida, it's a steam-driven ship, and it needs all the potable water that it can use to drive that ship, to convert it into steam. And so when you left port, you had 550 tons of water that was given to you when you left port. But when a steam-driven ship, you're going to lose about 7 tons of water a day. And that had to be brought in from the ocean to a huge filtration system. Yeah. And then after that, it was then converted into potable or fresh water. So it was used mostly, for instance, for running the ship and for the medical people aboard. They needed it to make sure they had hot water. Then, of course, the officers got theirs. And then, we came to ours. Well, we never got a chance to take a shower. But unless we were out, and sometimes you're out 40 days. Out on patrol. Because you were normally replaced after 25 days with another ship. If that other ship broke down and couldn't get there, then you stayed. And so quite often we were out there. So then, of course, you become a little bit rank and you needed to have a shower. And so you had 3 minutes. You stepped inside the shower, you turned it on, you got wet, you turned it off, you soaped yourself, you stepped back inside that shower, and you let the water wash off the soap, and then you stepped out and you dried yourself, and that was it. Next guys. And if you talk more than 3 minutes, you took more than 3 minutes, then all your mates would be up along the passageway with their towels wrapped around their neck, and they're waiting for you to get out. And if you were too late, they'd take it and whack! They'd whip you in the behind, and you would have a sore behind for about an hour. But so that was your wake-up call. You made sure it never happened to you again.
Can't you just jump off?
Can't you just jump off the ship and go for a swim and then climb back on the ship?
Not if you want to live.
Okay. What do you mean?
Well, the ship, if it's moving.
I see.
I see. Okay.
Number two, even if it is alongside, even if it's not moving, and you're in, shall we say, the Sea of Japan, and that water is cold. But we did do it when we were in the Gulf Stream. After the war, we came back from Korea, and we did naval exercises in the Gulf Stream. And of course, we were able to, because the Gulf Stream is like a sheet of glass and it's warm. And we were able to get in there. We would have regattas, with rowboats and so on and so forth. Then you were able to go swimming over the side. But the other thing, too, is you had guys walking around the ship with a rifle to make sure that the sharks didn't get you. So, so you could go swimming over the side in peacetime, but...
You mentioned sharks. You guys caught some sharks.
Right.
What happened there?
Well, I was not involved. I absolved myself from all of that. We were in the same particular day, we were in a Gulf Stream, and we were having a regatta, and some of the guys noticed there were sharks around. And so what one of the stokers did to get them at the cook, they got a big grappling hook, which is like a big steel hook. They put meat on it, and they threw it over the side. Sure enough, bang, they got a hit. So they pulled it up, and the guys took their rifle, and they fired and shot the shark. And they brought it up on board. And we were all saying, oh boy, we're going to have shark steaks for supper. And all of a sudden, the executive officer showed up, and he said, get that damn thing off my deck now.
Why?
I mean, you could have shark steaks. They're saving money for food.
No. Even at that time, there was an environmental friendly situation going on, and you were not allowed to take, shall I say, an endangered species and use it for your supper. So we actually had to throw the thing back over the side, and it swam away after all this. you know. So you know how long I lived, but no, he didn't want to have that. So that was it. And don't ask me the reason. I can't tell you, other than the fact that he decided that this was not going to happen, not on his ship. Yeah.
What I heard that the Haida was in. You went back to Canada on the Haida at some point. What happened? There was a tropical storm.
All right. Well, we were still over there. We were on station until September. On August the 26th, 1954, we were returning from Tokyo. If I recall, we were the guest ship for Louis Saint Laurent, our Prime Minister at the time. And we spotted the storm, I guess, and they tried to get around it to a certain extent, but they couldn't, so we went through it. And it was quite severe. The ship almost sunk, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
And, give an example. The distance from the water line to the bridge is 40 feet or 13 meters.
Okay.
When there was only 4 of us up on the bridge, there was the captain, the officer watch, one lookout, and myself.
Yeah.
Everybody else was down below, and as I mentioned before, that everything was just tightened down strongly.
Yeah.
And we look up, and I could see the waves. They were about 65 feet, or shall we say 30 meters almost, high, breaking over the top of the ship. And the ship would go down, and the back of the ship would come out of the water, and the big propellers would.
Do you mean the front of the ship would go down, the back
right
of
out
the
of the
ship
water,
would...
and the propellers, we call them screws, would vibrate, and the whole ship would shake. Then we get back down, and we're doing this, and you know, we were very, very concerning. And all of a sudden, we got caught with a confluence of waves where you came aboard the ship the other day. We got hit with a confluence of waves, if I recall, on the port aft, and the whole ship started to somersault. Turn upside down.
Forward somersault?
Just roll over.
Okay. You mean sideways?
And luckily for us, a confluence of waves and wind came back the other way and brought us back up again. And I can recall I was standing like me to you away from Captain Charles, and I could, because we were all scrunched in the corner, and I could hear him say, "Come on, girl, you can do it, you can do it." And God was in our corner, and the ship righted itself. We come up to the top of the waves, and boom, the ship stopped dead for about 5 seconds or so, maybe longer. You know, I can recall they going.
Because the propellers were out of the water.
And then we went back down again. We were in that for 16 hours.
How were you able to stand it? Were you frightened? Were you bringing up? What was your reaction?
Standing was a mute point. Most of the time, you had to hold on to everything. Down below, there was guys that were tossed up against the, we call them bulkheads or walls of the ship. Some against the deck heads, which is the ceilings of the ship. And they had broken arms or cut faces or whatever. And they eventually, 5 of them had to make their way to sickbay to be treated. And I know this because I had to go to Ottawa to dig out some records from the Haida, and then that was one of them. That was one of the thingies there. So in essence, you say standing up. Well, that was we basically were able to do that, and eventually we were able to turn the ship around and get what is known as way on, which we just basically surfed. But the problem is, there's only 75 miles between communist China and Japan in the Strait of Formosa, and we were starting to drift over towards, communist China. And I could imagine the phone call between Mayor Dezong and Louis Saint Laurent saying, "What do you want us to do with your ship?" But eventually we were able to turn it around and head back. We finally got back safely to Sasebo, Japan. Now, when that wave hit, if you look aboard the ship, you saw these 2 big pieces of steel. They were called davits, and they held the boats. Okay. And the captain's cutter was on there. And they had just spent about $5,1954, $53. Getting all
$53?
$5,1953, $1954.
Okay.
And it was to make it all like gussied up nice for the prime minister. When that wave hit, it just turned that thing almost into kindling, and bent two big steel davits. And down below there was all different parts of the ship were damaged. We were able to get back into Sasebo, Japan, and we went in there, and they were able to do the repairs and give us a new.
Oh, geez.
So it was quite the experience, and that was the time I thought for sure I was goner, you know.
Okay, I better start winding it up a little bit. In an Inside Halton article, you said that because of your wartime experiences, the sense of values is totally different from everybody else's. My recollection of different things I've seen throughout the war and the world are totally different than anybody else. Can you elaborate? What do you mean?
Well, I guess any veteran anywhere who has been involved in any type of either peacekeeping, active peacekeeping, or any world wars, such as World War II in Korea, World War I, you don't know what you're getting into until you get there. And your sense of anxiety for your own well-being and those around you, and just all the frivolous things that you normally would be in as a, shall we say, a civilian, that becomes totally inconsequential. Because from the moment you wake up in the morning until the moment you go to sleep at night, your well-being, your bent, you're set together to ensure that you're going to survive. And so because of that, your total outlook on life, you have an
extreme sense of purpose.
Exactly. So the whole thing is that it's hard to explain, but first of all, you're in a completely different atmosphere as you'd ever be when you're at home. You're with, like I said, 250 guys aboard a ship. You're all there for a certain purpose. Your concentration is towards that objective, as small as your little part might be. It's like a chain, you know, you're as strong as the guy beside you. So that whole milieu of being aboard a ship is so foreign and different to anything you've ever done in your life at home or with your friends and family, that it just changes all of your values to a certain extent. You no longer are petty about a lot of things. You're no longer complain a lot. Sometimes we do, obviously. You know, we're only human. But when you come back on to leave the armed forces and go back into civilian life, many things what people think are so serious, you look at them and say, what? You know, when you consider that, you know, you just stuck your neck out there.
Like what? Like what?
Well, for instance, whose room is where at home? We don't care in the Navy. You all had the same room. You know, when you live in a house with your family. Well, your sisters, your brothers have this and this and this, and there's always fights over. I want that. I want that. Never ever. You know, when it comes to even for religion, we had and race and religion, we had no qualms whatsoever. Having been in the armed forces and having gone shoulder to shoulder with the guy beside you, it didn't matter what his religion or his politics were or his race was, because you're there with him. You're one. You go into civilian street and you see all these petty people yapping and arguing and the hatred going around. You say, what? You haven't seen anything until you get into a war zone. You know?
So I guess the South Koreans are very appreciative of you.
This medal we have here, like I say, I call it my own wellness belt.
Yes.
It is given to us by the World Church of Peace in Korea. Most of the medals we have here come from there, although a lot of them are for volunteer duties. But yeah, definitely.
They sent you masks.
Yes.
During
that
COVID.
That was beautiful of them. The South Korean people, they just love those 24 nations, 18 at the beginning, but 24 at the end nations that went to their rescue. And they can't do enough. It was because of their stepping in there and helping them that they appreciate it. They sent us masks during COVID twice. And myself personally, I had over 80 masks that were given to me.
Okay.
Every time we go anywhere, if we have like a Korean event, and the Korean people are sponsoring it, such as we did back in the 23rd of July here in this club, they always have a gift for the veterans. They're, as far as they're concerned, veterans can walk on water. They just, Korean people are just so. We went over there in 2010 on a revisit, and we had roughly about. Of course, we thought we're going to fly in there, and we're going to wind up sleeping in Navy barracks. No, we were all there in a 5-star hotel latte, world renowned.
For how long? One
no,
day?
for a week. For a week.
A week? Oh, 5-star for a
I'm
week.
telling you, I oftenly joke and said I went into the room and it was so beautiful. I wanted to wear my clothes to bed so I wouldn't dirty the sheets. But in essence, though, that's how they were. They treated us. They wined us and dined us, and they were just. South Korean people cannot do enough for any United Nations person that went over there, or anybody that went over there to help them rebuild their country or protect their country. I just marvel at them. I'm embarrassed at times in some of the gifts that they give me. Watches and scarves and everything, and they it's their tradition. And if you look, there's a medal here.
Yeah.
That is actually the Republic of Korea War Medal. We have brought 5. We wanted to bring 12. We were always going the other way. The Minister of Patriots and Veterans Affairs in Korea. They are always inviting United Nations troops back for anniversaries. We were there in 2010. On the way home, we decided we wanted to bring some of their troops over. And so, to make a long story short, we did eventually get 5 Republic of Korea veterans that were in the battles with our Korea War veterans. So myself, and so at the end of it all, we had a big banquet that night in Ottawa. Senator Martin's there and all the dignitaries. And
When was this?
This
When
is
was this?
2010.
Okay.
No, it's 2013. Pardon me, 2013.
Oh, okay.
And we had signed what they called the kimchi girls. They were young ladies that spoke both English and Korean, and because we didn't speak Korean. And anyhow, so at the end of this night, this banquet, everybody's feeling tired and very, very sentimental about them going back. And one fella jumps up, Korean veteran jumps up, and he takes this off of his jacket. And he pins it on me and gives it to me. And I'm going like, and the kimchi girls were saying yes, because in the Oriental society, when they give you a gift, it's an insult if you don't accept it. So I was rather embarrassed. But this is this is the Republic of Korea War Medal that he gave to me. Oh, don't worry, he told me, I'll get another one. So that just explained, just showed you the amount of love and admiration that they have for anybody that's gone to their country to try and help them rebuild it and save it.
Can you maybe tell us?
Well, I do my best because I haven't done it full time.
Okay.
First one here is the Korean War Medal.
Okay. From the Koreans.
Oh, this is Canadian. All these medals are issued by Canada. By Canada. All these medals are issued by Canada. Okay?
Oh, okay.
Anything that's issued by a foreign country or anybody else is over on the right hand side.
Oh, okay.
The second one is a NATO the NATO medal for my exercises or serving a NATO, and with the Korean clasp on it. This one is the Canadian Peacekeeper Service Medal, which most service members do. Canadian Forces members do get. This one here is the United Nations medal with the Korean clasp on it. The next one over is should be the Veterans Affairs Commendation for Volunteer. It's by Queen Elizabeth. The other one's the Queen Elizabeth Diamond Jubilee Medal. And this one here at the end is the Sigmund Rhee Medal, which was the president of Korea when the war started and ended.
He didn't put it on you, did he?
No, these were given to all of these were given to all the Canadian government as recognition of our service over there. So that's what they are. Of course, this big one, like I said, was given to us by a church called the Church of World Peace for being over there and maintaining peace and peacekeeping in Korea.
Wow. You do sacrifice a lot. You go there and who knows what can happen. So, you're prepared to give your life.
Right, when you go back, I'm talking 69 years ago, and that's not even a second thought. You don't even think of any of this. This all accumulates over time, and you wind up with all these medals, etc. And, very thankful and very grateful for having you. But doesn't really, I don't.
I know. It doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things.
No.
What matters is that you did good.
Well, we did. I always call it a we because there's other guys aboard that ship, other members of the Canadian Forces that sacrificed their lives over there and so on and so forth. So, we did good.
You did. Yeah, well, thank you very, very much for your service. I mean, we need more people like you in this world.
Geez.
Definitely.
Well, there's some people that might disagree with that.
Okay, thank you so much.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
one. Have a good one.
Thanks.